Hello and welcome. You tune into Market Cafe with me, Ankita Saxena, and with me is Shishti Sharma. In the next 1 hour, we'll take you through how the global markets have fared, and also we'll take you through all the cues that you need to watch out for in today's before the start of today's trading session. But first up, let's take stock of how the U.S. markets finished yesterday. Now, we do see U.S. futures that are slumping on trade tensions. We have the geopolitical pressure that is still on, and on the back of that, we do see the futures that are reeling under pressure. We also see, the EU tensions on the back of the Trump's Greenland rhetoric that is weighing on the global risk sentiment, and that is something that has been weighing in on the markets. And on the back of that, we did see Dow Jones that ended up, 0.1% lower. S&P 500 was very, very flat. That ended with cuts of a very marginal 4 odd points, and Nasdaq Composite also very, very flat for the day, closed the day yesterday with cuts of just 14 points. But, there is a chance that, Dow Jones might fall 300 points because that's what the futures are indicating. They're already down 378 odd points, and S&P 500 is now down 0.9%, and Nasdaq futures are poised to lose almost 1% in the session. And this is on the back of course, Trump announcing on the Truth Social that, he will be imposing the tariffs on the NATO countries if they do not support him in his Greenland rhetoric. So that's how largely the sentiment as far as the global markets are concerned, Shrishti.
Absolutely, and Ankita, even Trump is definitely not backing off. He's continued to say that he will impose 100% tariff, their follow-through plan to hit the European nations with tariff against the Greenland. Even we have the commentary coming in from Besant as well. And well, of course, the US markets were shut yesterday, but for today, we are seeing the futures definitely slumping in. But along with that, it's the commodity market that is reacting very well to the safe haven demand, while again coming back. As of now, gold is inching high with almost 1.5% of the gain, while silver also continues its uptick. But oil prices, they are seen to be a bit steady right now after 2 days of gain, and Brent oil is trading up around that $64 per barrel mark. But Ankita, believe that whole host of other global stories to track as well.
Absolutely. US President Donald Trump has linked his aggressive push in Greenland to missing out on the Nobel Peace Prize, saying that he no longer feels bound to think purely of peace. He refused to rule out force, warning Europe of fresh tariffs if talks fail. The row has rattled markets, strained NATO, and pushed the European Union to weigh retaliation on up to $108 billion of US imports. Now, the Trump is due in Davos this week. Let's take a look. We can see on our screens this Trump talking about at Davos. So he is at Davos. And let's go across and listen in to what the experts said on the issue.
You also take account of the NATO factor. I mean, really, we're seeing two wedges in the Atlantic. One is between the United States and Europe, especially the EU, on economic issues. The other is a wedge actually within NATO, because NATO has two members on the other side, in other words, United States and Canada. And here we are, I mean, this has been with us for some time. We're feeling some threat to the unity of NATO. So Europe's in a bit of a mess all round, both defence-wise. NATO has kept the peace in Europe for at least 80 years. That's how we see it. But also economically, with every single one of those 8 nations that are threatened with sanctions with tariffs rather, not sanctions, tariffs, voicing their views very substantially after the announcement about tariffs.
Strategic interest of the US is definitely understood in terms of the access to Greenland and why he has been pushing for it. But the resistance from the NATO countries and then his, I would say, response for imposing 25% more tariffs from February 1st means that there could be a possible escalation of tempers before this actually I would say, takes a settlement. Having said that, the interest of the president and the United States on Greenland is nothing new. It's something that they have been talking about for quite a while. But the fact remains that Denmark has had multiple, I would say, incursions on it, and they have tried. Other states have also tried it, including during World War II, to lay claim, and it has not happened. That Denmark has been able to lose any status that it holds on it. But now the thing is serious because it is taking an economic turn.
All right, moving on to another story, and the European Union is scrambling to avert threatened tariffs by Donald Trump linked to Greenland while preparing retaliation if talks fail. Now, EU leaders will meet at an emergency summit on Thursday, weighing a €93 billion tariff package and even the bloc's unused anti-coercion instrument. Now, the dispute is set to spill into the World Economic Forum in Davos, where Trump will address the global leaders. Sumita Karir joins in with more details.
That's right. Tensions between the European Union and the United States are only soaring, given the fact that US President's latest tariff threat on 8 European Union countries over Greenland. This could result in a mega trade war, as the EU nations, they are preparing for countermeasures reportedly. And this could lead to all the countries actually suffering a massive blow. In fact, retaliating to what Donald Trump has been suggesting with respect to Greenland and Denmark, President of France, Emmanuel Macron, stated that no amount of intimidation will change EU nations' course on Greenland. Remember, the US president announced 10% tariffs on 8 European countries from February 1 and a 25% further tariff from June 1 in case there is no resolution to this measure. In fact, a report suggests that EU is also thinking of some countermeasures. One, it could be possible retaliation related to a package of its own tariff of 93 billion euros of US imports. In fact, those were previously suspended for 6 months in August. In fact, French President Emmanuel Macron has also asked the EU to activate its trade weapon that's called the anti-coercion instrument, ACI, and it's more popularly known as the trade bazooka. And this so-called trade bazooka could have broader impacts on the US, and that includes limiting access to public lenders, investments or banking activity, or restricting trade in services in which the United States has a surplus with the bloc. In fact, following this, the US president issued a statement suggesting that NATO has been telling Denmark for 20 years that you have to get the Russian threat away from Greenland. Unfortunately, Denmark has not been able to do anything about it. Now it is time, and it will be done. In fact, it remains to be seen how the engagements of President Donald Trump are going to go with some of the European leaders who are going to be in Davos this week. President Donald Trump will also be in Davos, and of course, it'll be interesting to see the kind of a direction that this particular conversation really takes, because this is not going to be beneficial for both either the United States, neither the United States nor the EU, and that is what the joint statement essentially stated, that tariffs would undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral.
And while Trump is set to meet global CEOs in Davos this week, meeting U.S. policy firmly in the spotlight and in the World Economic Forum. Now, business leaders across finance, crypto and consulting have been invited to a White House-backed reception after Trump's special address on Wednesday. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has warned Europe against retaliation, while China's Vice Premier He Lifeng is also due to address the CEOs.
And Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell will personally attend Supreme Court arguments this week in a case testing Trump's power to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook. Now, Trump moved to sack Cook last year, alleging mortgage fraud claims she denies and for which no charges have been filed. Now, the case is seen inside the Fed as existential, with major implications for central bank independence, as Powell himself faces a separate criminal probe linked to headquarters renovation.
And India and UAE will conclude a framework agreement on defense and on joint space missions, announced Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. Now, the letter of intent has been signed yesterday during the visit to UAE. President to Delhi said that the Indian Foreign Secretary. Listen into what he had to say.
First of all, a letter of intent was signed between the two sides to work towards concluding a framework agreement for a strategic defense partnership between India and the UAE. A letter of intent was also signed between the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center in space and the UAE Space Agency for a joint initiative for space infrastructure development and its commercialization. Under this particular initiative, we will look to setting up new launch complexes, satellite fabrication facilities, joint missions, space academy, and training centers.
And the International Monetary Fund has turned more optimistic on the global economy because in their latest update, the IMF has raised 2026 world GDP growth forecast to 3.3%, signaling resilience despite recent tariff shocks. Now, India's growth outlook has been revised sharply higher for FY26 to 7.3% on strong earnings momentum. Anjali Palod breaks down what does it mean for India and the global economy.
Right, so the headline number is out. The IMF has raised its 2026 global GDP growth forecast to 3.3%, and that is up 20 basis points from the last forecast in October. The primary driver, according to IMF, is the massive surge in AI investment, which the fund says is offsetting the headwinds that have come in by the global trade disruptions. Now, turning to the world's two largest economies, both US and China have seen their 2026 outlooks upgraded by 30 basis points. The US is now projected to grow at 2.4%, and this is fueled by the lower policy rates and the new tax breaks, while China's 2026 growth is being pegged at 4.5%. Now, for us here in India, the news is a little bit of a double-edged sword. The IMF has raised our FY26 growth forecast following the powerhouse momentum we saw in the October to December quarter. However, looking further into FY27, the fund expects this growth to ease as these temporary cyclical factors begin to fade away. Elsewhere, the Eurozone sees a marginal bump at 1.3%, while Japan is nudged up to 0.7%. Brazil, however, has been downgraded to 1.6%, and this is following last year's monetary tightening there. The IMF has, however, warned that the risk remains tilted to the downside for the entire global economy. They're specifically watching out on the AI-driven market correction, renewed trade tensions, and the fiscal vulnerabilities in the high-debt nations. But all in all, the tech boom is providing the fuel for now, but the fund suggests the medium-term path remains complex.
Right, with that, it's time for us to slip into a short break. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we'll get you more updates on the market. Stay tuned.